My people, listen to me well. Before guns fire, words spark. Before revolutions born, voices rise. It is the voice that cannot be chained, the idea that cannot be killed. They may lock up a man, but they cannot lock up the truth. They may silence the microphone, but they cannot silence the spirit. The power is ours, the voice is ours, the future is ours. So let us speak, let us shout, let us write, let us sing. Because words shake governments, words awaken people, words turn crowds into movements, and movements turn the world upside down. My people, do not fear. Raise your voices, for words are weapons that never rust. Words will carry us into freedom. With this, I welcome you to today's episode where we examine the personality, leadership style, ideology, and vision of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu and place them in historical context by comparing them with genuine, selfless freedom fighters across Africa and the world. Today we'll be talking about genuine and selfless freedom fighters and the burden of bold speech. Throughout history, words have often been more dangerous than weapons. Long before protests begin, before revolutions ignite, and before governments react, someone speaks. That speech, whether spoken through a microphone, written in a pamphlet, or broadcast across borders, becomes the spark that unsettles power. In today's episode, we examine one of the most defining and controversial aspects of freedom movements: bold speech. Specifically, we explore how bold speech has shaped the perception of freedom fighters across history, and how this reality helps us better understand the communication style of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. This discussion is not about praising or condemning harsh language. It is about understanding why bold speech emerges, why it alarms authorities, and why history often reassesses it differently with time. Freedom struggles rarely begin with violence. They usually begin with words. The American Revolution began with pamphlets like Common Sense by Paine. India's independence movement grew through Gandhi's writings and speeches. The civil rights movement in the United States advanced through sermons, speeches, and letters. In Africa, anti-colonial resistance was fueled by fiery rhetoric from leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and Amilcar Cabral. Their speeches directly challenged colonial authority and questioned the legitimacy of imposed systems. At the time, these leaders were often described as dangerous agitators. Today, they are remembered as national heroes. This pattern is consistent. Speech that challenges power is rarely welcomed by power. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's rise to prominence is inseparable from his use of speech, particularly through radio broadcasting. His language is often emotional, confrontational, and uncompromising. This has made him one of the most polarizing voices in contemporary Nigerian political discourse. Supporters argue that his bold speech reflects the depth of frustration felt by many who believe their grievances have been ignored for decades. Critics argue that such language escalates tension and hardens divisions. Both perspectives exist simultaneously, and history teaches us that this dual perception is not unusual. Malcolm X, during his lifetime, was accused of promoting hatred and extremism. Martin Luther King Jr., now widely celebrated, was once labeled a dangerous radical by government agencies. Nelson Mandela's early speeches were considered so threatening that he was imprisoned and branded a terrorist by several Western governments. Bold speech, by its nature, forces society to listen even when it is uncomfortable. Bold speech does not usually emerge in environments where people feel heard, respected, and protected. It often arises when moderate voices have failed. History shows that communities typically begin by seeking reform through dialogue, petitions, and political participation. When these channels appear blocked or ineffective, frustration accumulates. Eventually, language becomes sharper, more emotional, and more confrontational. This does not automatically justify every word spoken, but it helps explain why tone escalates. In this context, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's speech reflects more than personal temperament. It reflects collective anger, historical memory, and perceived exclusion. Understanding this does not require agreement. It requires honesty about cause and effect. One of the most overlooked aspects of bold speech is the double standard applied to it. When those in power use strong language, threats, warnings, or ultimatums, it is often described as maintaining order or national security. When marginalized voices use strong language, it is often described as incitement or extremism. This imbalance appears repeatedly in history. Colonial authorities spoke harshly about suppressing resistance. Apartheid leaders used aggressive rhetoric to justify segregation, yet resistance speech was framed as the real danger. Understanding this double standard helps explain why bold speech from freedom fighters often receives disproportionate scrutiny. While history shows that bold speech is common in liberation movements, it also teaches us that it carries serious risks. First, bold speech can alienate potential allies. Not everyone who shares a grievance agrees with confrontational language. Second, it can provide authorities with justification for repression, surveillance, or legal action. Third, it can blur the line between expression and escalation, especially when emotions are high and trust is low. These risks are not hypothetical. Many movements have weakened or collapsed because communication outpaced strategy. This is where leadership responsibility becomes critical. History does not excuse every word simply because it comes from a freedom figure. Instead, it challenges leaders to balance truth-telling with foresight. One of the most important lessons from history is that intent and perception are rarely the same. A speaker may intend to awaken consciousness, but listeners may hear hostility. A leader may intend to mobilize supporters, but authorities may interpret threat. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's speech reflects more than personal temperament. It reflects collective anger, historical memory, and perceived exclusion. Understanding this does not require agreement, it requires honesty about cause and effect. Time has a way of softening rhetoric and sharpening meaning. Many speeches that were once condemned are later quoted in textbooks. Many words that led to imprisonment are later carved into monuments. This does not mean all bold speech is justified. It means context matters and judgment evolves. History asks future generations not only what was said, but why it was said, what conditions produced it, and what alternatives existed at the time. The real question is not whether bold speech is comfortable. It rarely is. The question is whether societies are willing to address the conditions that make bold speech inevitable. Suppressing speech without addressing grievances may create silence, but it rarely creates peace. Bold speech is the burden many freedom fighters carry. It attracts attention, provokes reaction, and invites consequence. It can inspire courage or deepen division. It can accelerate change or hasten repression. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's rhetoric places him firmly within a long historical tradition of outspoken resistance figures whose words unsettled power structures. Whether history will judge his speech as necessary, excessive, or misunderstood remains an open question, one that only time can answer. As students of history, our responsibility is not to react impulsively, but to analyze carefully. So we end today with this reflection. When polite speech fails to bring justice, what tone does history expect the unheard to use? Stay tuned and see you on the next episode.